There we go.
Hey, Jim.
Hello, Martin.
Well, good morning. How's your morning going?
I got a lot going on here at the farm.
Oh, okay. Right. So where are you? You're in Tennessee, right?
I'm just outside of Nashville.
Wow. That's the
Yeah,
place.
yeah, it is. It's quite a place. There's nothing like it on earth. That I've been all over, and there's nothing like it. Guitar players everywhere. The guy who bags your groceries is a better guitar player than you are.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's
How
true.
depressing.
It's true. But
Yeah.
yeah, good
And
place to be.
what do you get up to there? Do you have are you actually on a farm? I've seen photos. It looks like you are.
Yeah, we've got 20 acres here. We've got horses. Actually, my big farm dog got into it with something last night. He's laying here on the floor with me. He's got a big sore on his neck.
Oh no.
You can see him right here down.
He's just laying down, pretending it's not happening.
He's licking. He's got a big red bloody thing on his neck. He got into it with some critter. I mean, that's his job. That's what he does.
Yeah.
He's a livestock guard dog. He's a Kangal.
Right.
So
So he rounds them up.
yeah,
That
he
sounds
takes care of
fantastic.
the coyotes and foxes and that sort of thing. So predators.
Wow. We
Yeah.
have no predators here. We just have little lambs. So,
Really?
yeah, yeah. It must be terrifying when you've got things that can destroy your animals like that.
Yeah, that's his job. That's what he gets paid for.
Very cool. Well, lovely to meet you. We've sort of discussed things on Messenger a little while,
Yep.
and you helped me fix my Super 70 pickup, which I was really pleased about because that
Yep.
thing's badass. It sounds
Yeah, they
amazing.
are cool pickups. Very
Yeah.
cool.
It's a very grippy sound. It's a little bit spitty, a little bit bitey.
Yep.
I can see why Ed liked it. Um,
Yeah. I've used them for years. I remember back in God, probably early 80s. I had so back then these guys would bring in their Ibanez V's or their Ibanez Destroyers. Everybody wanted to put an aftermarket pickup in it. They all thought those were junk pickups. So I had a great relationship with a music store back then. And they'd have a bucket full of pickups and they just say, yeah, you can take this, you take this. So I get all these old Gibson pickups, Dirty Fingers, and all those pickups of the era, including those Super 70s. So yeah, I accumulated like a 5 gallon bucket full of pickups.
Perfect. Just waiting for the time to come back around.
Exactly. Right.
It's a
Right.
clever move. Um, but yeah, you've got something to talk about. So I've downloaded the new Brown Sound Collection 78, 79. I was playing through it last night at home, and this thing's incredible. So, well,
Thank you.
congratulations on it. It's been a labor
Thank
of
you.
love, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I got into this thing after Ed passed. I've been doing this for years. It's essentially the same rig I've been playing for 30, 40 years, something
Yeah,
like that. I mean, I'm an old guy, if you can't tell.
me too.
So I've been playing these four-hole Marshall Super Leads forever, and
Yeah,
you just kind of learn little tricks playing small clubs and smaller venues that you have to quiet them down. So that's the same thing Ed was doing. So I
yeah,
kind of grew up doing the same thing that he was doing. So I stumbled upon a lot of the things along the way,
yeah,
trial and error and stupid tests and theories and
yeah.
pulling output tubes, I played many a gig on one output tube.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
test.
Yeah. So the text won't tell you that it's not fantastic, but
No.
yeah, just creative thinking. So
Yeah.
it's after he passed, I decided to do one of these Brown Sound videos, this Brown Sound Quest thing, because I kind of knew what was going on.
Mm.
Um, and it kind of became a hit. And then I had to do the second one, then I had to do the third one, and
Yeah, people love what you do, Jim.
it's cool. I mean, I figure I can impart a little bit of knowledge, throw some wild theories out there, and I think I come pretty close to it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what's coolest about it because nobody was there, and whoever was there isn't talking,
right.
and we just know what it sounded like, and it's that's first. It's like, okay, what did this do to us? So I wanted to take you back a little bit and
Okay.
think about time before you first heard Van Halen. I don't know how old you were when you heard Van Halen first.
12 years old.
12, yeah, 13 for me.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like ADBC. It's like time started again at that point because I'd never heard that sound. I didn't know
Right.
guitars could do that. I'd heard the buzzy sort of light Marshall sound and it had a raspy quality and that was rock, but I'd never heard that total saturation that cohesive sound that he achieved.
Right.
Do you remember what it did to you? I mean, presumably
Oh,
right then.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I touched on it in one of these recent videos. I had already been playing guitar. I started playing when I was 9, so that was 1975. And I was over at a buddy's house who was also a guitar player. And I mean, we were novice guitar players, but we were, listening to Aerosmith, Uriah Heep,
Yeah.
Rory Gallagher,
Well, that was on the playlist before Van Halen, right?
Deep Purple, all of that stuff
Yeah,
on.
me
Of
too.
course, Kiss. We were young, so you had to listen to Kiss too. Although they were really good songwriters, but that's another off on a tangent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was Thanksgiving Day, 1978, and he said, you got to hear this, and he put the needle on, and it's like, oh, wow, that we had never heard anything like that. It was a total new sonic treatment of the guitar, the whole band, really.
Yeah, it was.
But it was just, you know, you're old enough, and you were going into music stores. You remember going in, everything would be a Les Paul or a Stratocaster.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
no such thing as the Super Strat.
No, no.
None of that stuff. It was rare to find a guitar with a wiggle stick on it.
Yeah. I remember the Honda catalog had a black and white striped guitar about 78, 79.
Yeah.
Just as I was hearing it, and I was just like, that's the one. But of course it would have played like shit. But I think
More
that's
than
the one
likely.
Ed was really pissed off about that, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah,
Copying his guitar.
with
And
good reason, for sure.
yeah, he started something big. So that's when it all changed for you then. So you heard it Thanksgiving, and you knew that everything changed then. It was like nothing could go backwards. There was a new benchmark for sound, wasn't there?
Yeah, and it was hard not to notice. It was like I said, the music store thing. It changed by 79 or 80, you started to see all these super strats come in, and you could rarely find a Les Paul anywhere.
Yeah, they were out of fashion then.
They really were. I mean, the pointy guitars were always kind of around because the metal guys were still playing the pointy guitars. But
Yeah,
yeah, you couldn't find a good old fashioned Les Paul
no.
or a
So
335 or anything.
I think till Slash came out, and then
Yeah,
Les Paul's a go-go then.
yeah, yeah. And
But
the playing style too. I mean, obviously we were back in those days, we didn't have, as you know, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have tabs. I
no,
mean, tablature didn't exist either.
it did not.
People don't know that
I
either.
know. The first time I saw real guitar tab was when Steve Vai tried to transcribe Eruption the first time
Yep,
in
yep.
Guitar Player, and I was like, those are the symbols we need. But there were still some notes missing. I think it wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah, he didn't quite get it, but still
Yeah.
trying to, even at that young tender age, trying to get that what he was. I don't even know what year that was. That had to be 82, maybe somewhere around there.
Yeah. For me too, as well. That was exactly when I was doing it.
Yeah.
I think before 81, I hadn't heard it. And then somebody gave me a tape, and I just took it to school with a portable cassette player and played it to everyone. Like,
Yeah.
listen to this. This is a guitar. And they were like, I don't care. And I couldn't
Well,
believe people didn't get affected by it to the same degree.
yeah, it was wild when it first came out. You'd read in the guitar magazines that he was using a synthesizer,
Right.
one of the early Roland guitar synthesizers, or whoever it was out at the time. Maybe it was ARP that had some kind of
Oh, yeah.
early thing for the guitar. Um, but yeah, that they couldn't figure out. Nobody could figure it out.
No. I mean,
And
the
it's
first album,
funny, I didn't figure it out till I was just sitting with my pile of crap Stella Harmony acoustic guitar with action, like that off the fingerboard.
yeah.
And I played all the time. I was played constantly. Then my mom came into the bedroom, and I was playing the guitar, and I was, probably figuring out a Foghat record or something, because I could play that stuff
Yeah,
back
that was doable.
then. That was, yeah, I could, oh, that's an A chord. I can figure that out, But she started talking to me, nagging me about doing something, and I had my hands resting on the guitar, and I was irritated, and I was tapping on the fingerboard, and the light bulb went off, and I said, oh, that,
Ding.
that's how he does it.
Yeah.
Because there was no YouTube, and I hadn't seen him live yet.
No, no.
So yeah, it was quite a thing.
It was. There were so many noises I couldn't work out. Even simple things like "You Really Got Me," chicky but those pick strikes, they sounded like nuclear. It wasn't just a plectrum on a string.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
like Armageddon. It was like, what?
Yeah, you could always do the chicka chicka, but you couldn't get it to sound that way.
No, no. And through a plexi with the humbucker turned up stupidly loud, you start to get that ephemeral extra sound, don't you? That became
Yep.
Ed's
Yeah.
trademark, and
Yeah.
that's where you live now. You're in that world with the plexi, with the four hole, just mining that sound as closely as you can.
Yep. Absolutely.
And now you've committed it to software. So that must have been a hell of a process as a producer of software instruments now.
Yeah, I was reluctant. They
Right.
dragged me they dragged me into this kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
Chris O'Hara, who's the guitar marketing guy, he's out in California, out in LA. He reached out to me out of the blue. It's well over, I think it was a year ago this last January, maybe February.
Mhm.
Um, and he just said, "Hey, what's your?" He introduced himself and he said, "Hey, are you the Internet Van Halen guy?" And I kind of chuckled at him. I said, "I guess if that's what you want to call me."
Yeah.
And so we had a great conversation. And he said, "Are you familiar with IK Multimedia?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I've been using your Sunset Sound reverb. I think it's great. I love it." Um, and then it moved into the whole Tonex thing, and he goes, "Have you heard of it?" No, I hadn't heard of it. He said, "Do you have much experience?" And I said, "The experience I have, I can't stand them. I hate modelers." I was using the Kemper,
Yeah.
or I've played a Kemper and some of the other, stomp box things like the Line 6 Pod or whatever I think they are. And I just never liked the way they felt. They didn't
No.
feel real. You could get, they could sound okay, but they
Yeah.
just didn't feel right in your hands. So I was completely turned off by him, but he ultimately said, "Well, would you take a look at it?" And so
Mm.
I said, "Sure." And it was better than what I had played, and it showed enough promise to me that I thought, you know what, I think this is worth the endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but it took a long time to get it to do what I got it to do.
Okay. Did you go backwards and forwards with profiling, back to the drawing board, just to get the whole sound rather than just the amp you were hearing?
Constantly. So I was trying to get there were certain things I had to do with the actual modeling software to, I don't want to say trick it, but it hears differently than we hear. And now I know we're doing some testing right now. They're making some advances in that whole capture process. So we're experimenting with it right now for the next volumes that are coming out. And it shows a lot of promise. But so there was a learning curve there, and I had to figure out what the software wanted to hear.
Mm. Yeah.
And and once I got through that, then it was full speed ahead on, okay, now let's listen to what really is going on that, on like Van Halen 1. That's the hard one.
Yeah.
That's that album. The other ones are pretty easy.
They sound like amps, the other ones, don't they?
Yeah, they kind of do. But Van Halen 1 does not. Van Halen 1 is raunchy, it's aggressive. I mean, we've all seen the forums. We've been down that rabbit hole. It's like,
Mm.
is it a dummy load? Is it a slave? I know you've done the Fender theory. So
Yeah.
because you did that,
Yeah.
I
Oh
got an
no.
old basement sitting here, and pardon my mess, that's my pickup vault open out there. I'm working on Fair Warning, so I've got all the
Wow.
pickups out there. I've got
I'd love
shit
to see down
scattered
there then.
all over the floor.
Nice.
So it's I took out the Fender Bassman.
Yeah.
I tried to dummy load that and run it into the input.
Hmm.
I pulled the output tubes out of the Fender Bassman, just running the preamp into the
Oh yeah.
and everything. I did the Boss EQ into the input.
No.
Um, I changed bias in the amp repeatedly back and forth. I just put a bias control on the back of the amp so I didn't have to open it up all the
Oh
time, and
cool.
it would just crank it and just adjust to taste, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And every theory you've ever read about, every theory that was ever tried
Yeah.
and talked about, I did, and I recorded, and listened back and adjusted, moved microphones, did this, did that, changed pickups, did this, every little combination I would throw together. And that's why it took a year.
Yeah, it will.
I mean, it's I've said it in a number of forums now, but it was well over 1,000 recordings, and that's just the ones that were once I got the Tonex, once I figured out what the Tonex wanted to hear,
Yeah.
and it was an accurate representation, a completely accurate representation. It felt right. Um, it was easily 1,000 recordings of just trial and error
Yeah.
for to get the Van Halen one sound.
Yeah, that's how many I throw away every time I do a video.
I know it's ridiculous. It's so I finally stumbled on it. I
Mm,
finally and it was from I told the story the other day. It was listening to Tone Talk
yeah.
with Dave and Mark, and they had Asi Hassan on, and I love him. I mean, he's a creative thinker, and he's got some great theories and great ideas.
Yeah, he is.
And he was talking about how the amp sounded broken.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about that, and I remembered what I mentioned earlier, that I used to play gigs with one tube
Right.
to try to quiet the amp down, and the amp got ridiculously aggressive sounding and weird sounding.
Okay.
Um, and, and so then it all started to click. I said, I'm going to pull the two tubes. So it's not push pull. You know, you've got the outside or the inside that you pull, and then you adjust the impedance and all that sort of thing to handle the mismatch on the output side. But I pulled valves 4 and 5.
Okay.
So it wasn't even.
No.
So we don't have an even output. We don't have both sides. We don't have that push-pull model going anymore.
Right.
And that's where the aggressive sound came from.
Oh,
And as
fantastic.
soon as I did it, I went, I'll be damned. That is the tone. That was the distortion character that I could never, ever find. And then there's this quote bouncing around out there, and I had somebody in a forum find the quote for me. And it was Ed saying it to Ted Templeman that he knows what tubes to pull to make the amp sound mean.
Wow. Just
So to
in
me,
the background, that small comment floating in the ether, and that
yeah,
was the answer. So, I mean, you've obviously done this for a long time, and then to discover that in what, the last 6 months or something,
yeah,
that's amazing. These discoveries are still out there waiting to be found, isn't it?
exactly. So that's, I don't know how many rabbit families I've kicked out of the rabbit hole at this point. I've been living down there.
You own it.
Yeah. And the for sale sign's up now. I'm trying to sell it to another rabbit family,
No, they won't
but
appreciate.
it was, it's, as soon as I did it in the room, as soon as I turned the standby back on the amp
Yeah.
and played it, I went, that's it. That is the other thing that it does is, the pedal tone on I'm the One. You're doing the pedal on the A string.
Yeah.
And if you've ever tried to record that and you ever do a little bit of because there's just a hair of palm mute on there when you're
Yeah.
doing that,
Yeah.
your speaker cabinet, your typical Marshall 412 is thumping at you
Correct.
like that 160 to 250 hertz frequency,
It's
and
too
you
much.
cannot get that sound of that pedal tone A
Correct.
because there's too much thump coming out of the amp. I don't care if you take the bass control on the amp and shut it off to 0.
Yeah. It's too
You
wobbly.
can't get rid of it. And you can't high pass it out of there either when you mix it, because you lose too much of what else is down there when you do that.
Yeah.
You can't notch it. I tried all that stuff. By pulling those two tubes, the amp, it loses its bass response. It loses its thump.
Really?
So it almost, you barely touch an EQ to fix it when you're recording it.
I'm just going to go and do that immediately as we finish the Zoom. Yeah.
You're gonna go, oh my God, look at that.
And does
It
it cause
really,
any bias issues that you've got to be careful of? Will it fry your output transformer? I mean,
I'm gonna talk to Mr. Friedman about that. We're gonna go back on Tone Talk and do that. I don't worry about such things. I'm not recommending it to anybody. I've never, I run the Variac at what people would consider ridiculous levels too. So, Ed even said he would run that down to 60 volts.
yeah,
And I do that routinely, 62, 63 volts.
right.
I don't use any master volumes. When I go play clubs or that sort of thing, I use a 4-holer and I turn the Variac down to 63
Right.
volts.
And that's your volume.
Yeah. Then
Very-
there's no TP, IMV, master kind of thing, no phase inverter stuff. I don't I don't think the amp sounds good that way, so I don't use them.
No, I agree. It's
So, they talk about cathode stripping in the tubes.
mm,
Maybe that does exist when you run the tubes and the heater's that cold.
mm,
Um, but so does you wear out tubes by cranking it to 10 and running it into an attenuator too. I mean, you run tubes full blast all the time, you wear them out.
yeah.
So I've never noticed a difference. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I've never noticed a difference in the life of a set of tubes. And
That's
I've never wrecked an output transformer. I've never done anything like that. And
wow.
I've been doing this for 35 years at least.
Really, that's very cool. Because there was always the talk about Ed blowing valves and also, well, tubes, sorry, and output transformers constantly. Um, and I always wondered what the hell he was doing to blow that many output transformers and valves. And it struck me that he's doing something non-standard. What?
Well, yeah, I think it has more to do with, I think some of that story is lore.
Okay.
You know, just like the volume levels he supposedly played at is lore, it's all just kind of, it's part of the image,
Yeah. Okay.
you know. Um, the number one thing when I was traveling, when I was touring, the number one, and I would blow output transformers and I would blow tubes too, but it was from vibration. So when a tube shorts, when it mechanically fails and does it, in a dramatic way, you can take out an output transformer
Yeah.
because
Okay.
the amp turns into an arc welder. I've melted tube sockets, porcelain tube sockets doing it that. So
Yeah.
I would, if there's any truth to that story that they tell back in the early days of throwing tubes in and out of that amp,
Mm.
I would say it would be probably exaggerated at best, but also that it was vibration.
Yeah. That's what they say. If you put your amp away when the valves are hot, if you move it rapidly, it'll just sort of hurt the valves more as if they were cold. They've
Yep.
reformed and become harder again. So
And just bouncing around in a truck,
yeah,
when you're, or as you guys say, a lorry, right? Is it a lorry?
yeah, yeah. We might say both. We're becoming more Americanized by the minute. But yeah, tubes, valves. That's always the big one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
now you you've dealt with the sound in ways that we don't particularly know about. And I think about the sound of a Marshall in, like, if you were in Dr. Roth's basement in Pasadena and you were listening to Van Halen practice, the chances are it would have been a really brash, harsh, trebly sound that you were listening to, plus
Yeah.
the cymbals and the overheads and stuff.
Right. Right.
You've achieved a finished, polished guitar sound that's worthy of an album. So, do you want to talk a little bit about what you did to achieve that treble polishing, perhaps we'll call it?
Um, it's mostly just doing signal chain using proper cable of the era. So I use the Belden wire. I'm not a big fan of the monster cable or any of the high-end Mogami or any of that. Is a Canary. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it's great cable, and
Mm,
I would use it to patch up the studio. But for a guitar cable, it's too bright.
got you.
So I use 70 feet of that old Belden cable to
Bit of
take some of the high
capacitance.
end off.
Yeah, soak the treble. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole idea behind the curly cords, and the guys use the
Yeah.
curly cords going into the Marshalls. You could have a lot of cable curled up in there, a lot of feet, a lot of length.
Yeah.
And then I ran into the actual MXR flanger, the old vintage one that you plug into the wall,
Yeah.
an old Phase 90, script Phase 90. And they aren't on. There's been some confusion I've seen on the forums here, on the chats, on the videos and that. They aren't turned on, but and there's been some discussion whether or not those had buffers back then or the buffers were added later to the MXR circuit. Regardless, they alter the tone.
Yeah, they
And
do.
they tone suck.
Yeah.
Whether it's a buffer, it changes the sound of the pedal, or it changes the sound of the guitar. So those were in the signal chain along with the original vintage Echoplex EP3. And we all know there's EP3 preamps all over the place. So obviously people want that sound in the signal chain.
Yeah.
So that was also in the signal chain. Then it just goes straight into the amp. From there, and we did the cabinet choices. So you can either choose a black back cabinet, and they're all 75 hertz. Black back cabinet, 25 watt, greenback 25 watt, greenback 20 watt, for like the old 68 cabinet,
Yeah.
which was what I'm currently using on the Women and Children First that I'm working on right now.
Preview there.
I'm digging that one right now. And then, of course, there's the JBL D120
Yeah.
and greenback combination. So those four cabinets are in the collection. So those were mic'd with SM57s.
Right.
The top one with the fizzy speaker,
Yep.
the brighter speaker, that mic position varied somewhat between the dust cap and the seam of the dust cap
Yeah.
going into the paper cone,
Yep.
straight on axis.
Yep.
And then the warmer microphone would be closer out by the surround of the speaker. So that would give you then you would blend the two. And I brought those into my analog console, which is right behind me here.
Fantastic. What is that, Jim?
It's an old Mackie. I mean, there's nothing great about it, but it's that 56 input 8-bus Mackie, and it's got some reputation for its preamps. They're pleasant sounding, and the EQs are really musical.
Yeah, there's
So
a lot of 90s records made on those 2000s.
Yeah, there were, and it's a if you want to get into this, it's a great entry level console, and
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, half the channels won't work at this point, but but
Same.
that's why I got 56.
Yeah, I know. I've only got 18, but I mean, yeah, I think probably 12 of them are fine.
Yeah, so I did some EQing as they would have done on the mic inputs.
Okay.
So I printed EQ onto Logic. So it would come out of Logic.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, it would come out of the console into Logic.
Yeah.
With a little bit of printed EQ.
Yeah.
And then I would bring it back out of Logic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I also did A800 Studer tape emulation on those two coming in.
Okay.
So just like they would have printed a 24 track.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Then I came back out of Logic and came back into the console like I'm doing a mix down to 2-track.
Yeah.
And then I ran that back through those analog channels.
Right.
And when I give you in the collection, we give you a hotter version.
That's right.
I did that with the console pre.
Okay.
So I would hit it harder.
Right.
I'd be blasting the VUs into the red so I could get you a little bit more of the preamp push.
Right.
So that would be, so I never hit the input harder of the amp. I didn't do anything like that. I
was wondering how you got more gain out of the same Marshall. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly how I did it because I'm not a believer in the theory that the amp was hit harder other than, the possibly 1 dB that the Echoplex gives it.
Yeah.
The Echoplex is more like a tone color thing.
Mm.
It's more of a low mid bump kind of thing. But then I treated it just like I was doing a mix down to a 2-track, and that's what ultimately was bounced out for the capture, for the modeling capture.
So it has been through a full recording chain.
Yeah.
By yourself who knows what it should have sounded like. And that's a tremendous amount of acumen, a tremendous amount of experience that you brought to it that most engineers just wouldn't have that history with guitar sound through the 70s, 80s. And
right.
The tricks people had to use then aren't often used now because we don't have the same tape. So you brought a lot to the table with that, Jim.
Right. And everybody, I always kind of giggle about it. Everybody's looking for a way to make their guitar stuff their recorded guitar warm. Everybody's in the digital world and everybody's in the box. And there's all of these emulations to make it sound like analog. So I thought, why not just use as much analog as I possibly can and do it the right way? So
yeah, exactly. Use the original to start with. Did you find it difficult to set the amount of gain you were hitting the Tonex with to be the same every time? Because I found that to be a little challenge. Different pickups might have double the DC output. I
did, and that's super important to how Tonex hears it and how Tonex reproduces what you're doing. And I would say as people are running through this collection, I find myself, so I use the like a PAF, a very low output PAF in the Strat.
Yeah.
and I used the Super 70 in the Destroyer, which would be the proper pickups. And that PAF in that Strat is like a 7.625K
Pretty
with a
low.
short A5 magnet. So it's a low output pickup. And plus I've got a 250K pot in there to take some of the high end off.
Yeah.
Um, so if you're those that are going to be using the collection, if they've got the modern pickups, if they've got the Wolfgangs or the EVH Frankenstein or a JB or any of these, custom, whatever that they're using
Yeah.
for their Van Halen guitars, I would highly suggest you turn the gain down on the Tonex, the input. Turn that first, it's called the gain knob right on the interface. Turn that down a little bit if you want to get closer to the album. And you might need to add a little bit of brightness.
Right.
Maybe roll the bass back a little bit because that hot pickup is going to be warmer and it's going to be darker. I mean, darker on the high end, warmer on the bottom, and definitely gainier.
Yeah.
So if you want to get closer to the album, you got to adjust for that. And that's why I set it up with every knob straight up noon when you open up the interface.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think maybe in future revisions of Tonex software, they might start to put a crosshair to tell you where you're aiming to get your input level, because I guess on most amp profiles, it's less important. You might want to run it clean through to dirty, but you brought all your experience to bear to get the right amount of sound level to make those fantastic albums. And really, people need to know where to hit that gain a little bit more strategically to make that happen.
Right.
Otherwise, they might be north or south of where you were.
Right. Exactly. And I want, obviously we set out to do an album tone, an album capture. So you can get it's Ed in a box is what it is. And that's what this whole series is going to be. And I've had a lot of calls for, well, why didn't you just do the amp without a cabinet?
Right.
And the reason I didn't do that is because of everything that we've talked about today. Mm-hmm. I can't control that. I can't control the way the amp is going to sound. The speaker is such an integral part of it.
Yeah.
Now, because there's been such an outcry for it, I will probably in the future, in the next 2 volumes, will give a capture of that amplifier, but it'll just be a good sounding plexi amp that's that's loaded down. It's got a dummy load. To me, you're already ruining it by putting a dummy load on it. Yeah. That's why I'm not a big fan of IRs. I think the technology is great, but you ultimately have to load that amp up. Yeah. And as soon as you load that amp up, you've changed the complete character of it. Even the best reactive loads out there still don't do it.
No, there's a different feel, isn't there? I've just got the 2 Notes Reload 2 box at the side of me for review. It's amazing, and it's got Celestion Impulse. There's sort of curves based on the speakers to give loading, and it definitely makes an improvement. But you can tell it's not invisible. But it is helpful. So so you might do that in future. Just have an amp capture for
just because so many have asked for it. That's come up a lot in these forums. So we may supply it, but honestly, there's nothing that special about the amp.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you pull the 2 tubes. There's your distortion character.
Yeah.
But you can do that with any amp, any super lead. I mean, it's a great sounding amp. Don't get me wrong. And it's got,
downplaying it like it's just everybody's Marshall, but no, you've tuned it to perfection. I mean, it's got all the right components, all in tolerances that work. So that's something, isn't it?
Right. It's got all the mods or whatever was suggested. Yeah. It's got all of that. It's the perfect specimen, and it sounds great. And I've had it for a long time, and there's a reason I've had it for a long time because it's a great amp. Yeah. So yes, I'm willing to give a capture of that, but it's just going to be, it's not going to get you there the same way that what our goal was in this collection.
Yeah. Yeah. The complete chain.
Right.
And so this is going to carry on then. You're going to do more of this. This is going to be the complete Roth albums, is it?
Yes, it is. So the next volume is going to be Women and Children First and Fair Warning.
Fantastic. Wow. I'm so looking forward to, all of Fair Warning, basically. Yeah.
And then we're going to move into Diver Down in 1984.
1984 is a very special one, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
A lot of things changed there that was very hard to put your finger on. Must have been something to do with 5150's limitations, maybe. which led to Al using electronic kit. And the guitar
Yeah.
sounds quite direct on that album, I find.
It's very clean.
Yeah.
It's very, very clean, and there's a lot of harmonizer. So we're still trying to figure that way. We're still trying to figure our way around the harmonizer because Tonex can't currently do that.
Oh, okay.
So we may have to do some sort of suggested settings, amplitude settings, or if you're running it in a DAW, suggested settings. I'll get you as it stands right now, it's going to be raw guitar sounds.
Hmm.
I mean, I shouldn't say raw, but it'll be the raw without the affected, unless I can figure it out. I'm trying to experiment with a couple of different things. So.
Yeah. I mean, IK Multimedia have become the home of Van Halen plugins, haven't they? With the Sunset Sound suite of reverbs, they do what, an Echoplex as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, they just need to get the Eventide in there and the 910 or whatever, and then
Yeah, it's a 910, and they use the 910 way up into the. I mean, I think 5150 never got anything more than a 910
really that's
or a couple of 910s. They might have put 940. Well, actually, I should take that back. When the 3000s came out, they started doing those.
okay.
But up until that, they didn't. I don't think the 949s were ever employed at 5150. They were in his live rack, but never, I think, at 5150 was the 910. Because, the 910's got the glitch.
It has, yeah.
And that's what's magical about it. It's kind of this random glitch that you get out of it. So, and the plugin does a great job at that glitch. The Eventide plugin does.
Yeah, I use it a lot. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the final bit of the cake then for the 1984 one that you're going to have to work out a system for. But
Yeah.
I'm sure the tone you're going to get is amazing. Maybe some different pickups in the guitar for that one.
There will be.
Yeah.
I'm actually having one wound right now, so I've got another theory I'm working on. So we'll see if that one gets unveiled. But
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait. I'll be staying tuned and waiting for those. Well, Jim, I mean, that's been really exciting to talk to you. I mean, thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, not at all. I wish you the best of luck with the collection.
Thank you.
And I'll be using it regularly. I'm going to do a review of it in the next 2 days.
Terrific. I look forward to that too. Be kind.
I will. I'll be honest and kind simultaneously. There's nothing bad to say about it, man. So congratulations.
Terrific.
You have a good day, and thank you for talking.
Thank you, Martin. Good to see you.
You too, mate. All right. Bye for now.
All right.
Bye.